Oregon football just got better on the defensive line. Significantly better. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch this show. Big shout out to everybody who has done so already, and big shout out to my guy, Max Torres, on the show today, covering the Ducks for Fan Nation at Sports Illustrated, and he hosts the Ducks Dish podcast. He is as tapped in to the recruiting trail as anybody that I know. And I know a couple people, not a ton, not as many as Max does, for instance, but we're always grateful to get you on the show. It's been a while because you keep going around places on the recruiting trail, man, but it's good to have you back.
Glad to be back, Spencer. Always a pleasure to hop on and talk some Ducks with you. Yeah, it's been a hectic, 3 weeks. Been out on the road and all over the place, really. So I'm glad to be, hunkered back in Long Beach, and the news just keeps coming. So it's a fun time for the Ducks right now.
It certainly is, and it's fun to be seeing the addition of Jordan Burch come to fruition. You wrote about this about, 36 hours or so before it dropped, and then it went official, and Oregon is adding Jordan Burch, who is a former 5-star recruit, went to South Carolina. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. Max, Oregon's defensive line gets better with this addition. I don't think there's, even if he's not, some otherworldly first-round pick, though he has that physical sort of talent, he is someone who upgrades Oregon's defensive line.
No doubt about it. It's a huge addition for Oregon for some of those reasons that you just mentioned. I think he was, without a doubt, one of the biggest names that was still in the portal. And he helps fill a major need for Oregon, right? With DJ Johnson going to the NFL draft, that's kind of, the main pass rushing threat for Oregon. And, let's be honest, it's no slight to DJ, but Oregon's pass rush wasn't exactly special when he was at Oregon. But that doesn't change the fact that you needed to go out and get a pass rusher that was at or near the top of Dan Lanning's priority list after, I think, getting Bo Nix back for another year, and then going out to get Austin Novosad after Dante Moore flipped was definitely big. But the Ducks really checked a big box with Jordan Burch's commitment. Definitely one that came together pretty timely, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit on this episode. But he's going to be a big piece of this group next year for Tony Tuioti and Tosh Lupoi and Lanning.
And it's something that was just so squarely missing from the defense this year, right? And there are a lot of different metrics that you can look at to show that Oregon's defense needs to improve. And, from 2021 to 2022, we didn't see the sort of improvement that I was hoping to see. But I think what Lanning and the rest of the staff are telling us is they feel that it was very personnel oriented. And I don't think that, the players who have been on the team for the last several years are necessarily bad, but I think they're not quite up to the standard that Lanning has, set for himself as a coach defensively. I mean, look at what Georgia does every year and what he did while they were there. That's what he looks at and sees. This is what a defense needs to look like. And you have to have elite pass rushers in order to do that. And that's what Jordan Burch has the potential to be. One question I think that's fair to ask here, Max, is, well, is he really going to be able to be a high-impact player when he was somewhat underwhelming at South Carolina? He had 3.5 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss, something like 40 quarterback pressures, which is a pretty good number this season for the Gamecocks. But overall, he was their highest-rated recruit since Jadeveon Clowney, and he was not as impactful as Clowney was. So he was a little bit disappointing in the eyes of some Gamecock fans, though certainly an SEC caliber starter, meaning he's definitely a Pac-12 caliber starter. What do you make of that, kind of a way of looking at it of, well, just how good can he be versus how good was he with South Carolina? What do you think the Ducks have in this guy?
Sure. Yeah. Before I answer that, I wanted to go back to one of your previous points because I think it's one that comes up a lot just when I'm talking to people in the college football world, specifically about Oregon and where they're at and where they want to go and what they need to do to get there. I want to talk about the defensive line and the personnel that they've had at that spot the past couple of seasons. They don't have bad players. I want to make that abundantly clear. They do not have bad players on the defensive line. Brandon Dorlus, Casey Rogers, guys like that, DJ Johnson, those are good players. I think it's just you don't have enough, guys of the caliber of, a Georgia, of an Alabama, those top tier excuse me. But you need to just keep stockpiling guys just like Jordan Burch if you want to go and get to the playoff, if you want to go win another Pac-12 title. You just need to have difference makers. You need to have dudes, and a lot of them on your defensive line. And I feel like that is a position where Oregon has just been lacking in terms of the bar that the rest of the sport has set for them. So I think Jordan Burch helps them take a significant step in the right direction in that regard. And then to your next question about kind of what kind of guy Burch is, I think he's obviously, an elite athlete. He's a huge human being, 6'6", 275 pounds is not a small frame by any means. Probably the biggest defensive lineman that they've had since Jason Jones transferred to Auburn, I would say. You got Taki over there, who's a big guy, but not quite as tall. And then obviously with him being on the lighter side compared to Taki, I think you have a little bit of versatility, right? If you want to kind of shape him up and, maybe lean him out a little bit, you can try to keep him on the exterior, on the edge, or maybe you want to go the other way and add some more, weight to that frame and try to flex him as an interior guy. But I think that he really kind of gives you the full package from an inside or outside perspective. I think he's probably more needed on the outside, right? And I think that he goes to a situation at Oregon where there's so much experience and so much production that's returning around him, where he's going to be playing with guys that already get it. They already know how Lanning's scheme works. They already know what Pac-12 football is like. And I think that, having that familiarity and that consistency within the whole group is only going to help Burt succeed once he gets to Eugene.
I would venture a guess and say positionally because, and I've talked about this previously on the show, he can play inside or outside. He is kind of a Brandon Dorlus type who plays inside and out. But here's the thing with Brandon Dorlus, who I really like, and I'm really glad he's coming back, was not expecting that at all. Casey Rogers, who we're going to talk about today on the show, that one less surprising, but certainly a welcome return for the Ducks amongst the defensive linemen. Dorlus played defensive end, or lined up at defensive end, I should say, many times this year. I don't have a snap count in front of me, but he played inside and he played outside. I wonder if he's as effective outside because he has an array of pass rushing moves, but he's built a little bit more like a defensive tackle, and he's nimble enough to play defensive end at times. And I wonder if he wasn't playing there this season because the staff felt like they didn't have enough guys who could line up at that edge position and make an impact to get after the quarterback the way Dorlus can, right? It's why at certain points in the season, I, pondered at one point in time, like, hey, is Justin Flo or Noah Sewell just going to line up at edge and we, put in somebody else at linebacker? And, that's not a conversation that's worth having anymore. But I think this is a situation where Burch should be lining up primarily at defensive end. And Max and I will talk more about why that is after we talk plenty about my friends at Bet Online, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. I don't know if they've got the sorts of things that are, ranging from the is Jordan Burch going to go here, is Jordan Burch going to go there, but everything that you'd want to bet in reason that you think you can find at Bet Online. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup, they've had it all, and they will have everything you need with college basketball really starting to get into full swing. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at Bet Online as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online is where the game starts. I think with edge being such a need, not only with DJ Johnson departing for the NFL because he's out of eligibility, but also just because I thought DJ Johnson was solid, but on an elite defense, he's probably your second or third best edge rusher, not your number one. And I think that's why we saw Dorless play outside more. And I think if you bring in Jordan Burch, as the Ducks are doing here, it allows Dorless to go where he succeeds the most, I think, and that's playing defensive tackle or nose guard, depending on the defensive personnel package, but primarily defensive tackle in a 4-2-5. Because Dorless's best moves, Max, as I'm sure you know, they come when he uses his hands, right? He's got really, really great hand usage, and that, I think, allows him to get some pressure up the middle, and now Burch can bring pressure off the edge and allow Dorless to almost entirely, I think, play on the interior of the defensive line. That's how I see it as of now, given the Ducks personnel.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I think, they can kind of play in a little bit of a complementary role, and maybe it's a deal where the staff kind of, moves Burch and Dorless around a little bit to kind of figure out what that best combo is. And maybe that's an added benefit of the veterans coming back for Oregon, is that they're going to be able to move some guys around and just continue trying to find that best combination that works for them. But I think that, like we talked about, just the versatility that comes with an athlete like Burch just gives you a lot of options. And I think that's exactly what you want just as a defensive coordinator, and perhaps even more so for Tosh Lupoi and Dan Lanning in this situation, since Oregon kind of has been known to be a multiple defensive type look since Lanning came to Eugene.
Yeah, and defensively, third down defense, huge issue this year. Pass defense, huge issue this year. You can't be good or successful in either of those areas statistically on defense if you can't pressure the quarterback, because corners are going to lose one-on-ones, even good ones, right? Christian Gonzalez got beaten man coverage sometimes this year. It's one of the best cover corners Oregon's had in the last several seasons, and they've had some really, really good players, but Gonzo is right up there. It's why he's probably going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. You have to be able to get the quarterback off his reads. You have to make him uncomfortable. You have to make him pull the ball down, pull his eyes down so he can't look downfield, collapse the pocket, stop him from being able to make throws. Like, there's so many things that come with being able to get pressure. And I think a lot of Oregon's defensive problems from 2022, there were certainly some personnel changes that you'd like to see made, particularly on the back end, or upgrades in production on the back end of the defense. But it all starts with getting pressure. There has never been, nor will there ever be, a great defense that wasn't able to pressure the quarterback without having to blitz a bunch of guys. It just doesn't happen. So I think that's why they bring in Burch here. But speaking of defensive linemen, Max, another defensive line piece of the puzzle was filled in a couple days ago. And there's so much news, and so many of you have asked me questions, by the way, which I love. I will get to them as soon as I can. The news, news like this just keeps flying in, and then we got to cover that. But, it's a long off season. So I promise any question that you send me, I will get to at some point here on the show. But Casey Rogers is coming back, and I really liked Casey Rogers. Is he as dominant of a player or impactful as Brandon Dorless? Maybe not. Is he, an all Pac-12 first team caliber guy? No, but do I like having him there? Yeah, I do, because there were just a lot of instances this year, Max, where I watched Casey Rogers, and if I'd been a fan of the other team, I would have just found myself saying on more than one occasion, man, 98 is annoying.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe Casey Rogers, because, just being a defensive tackle in general, you're not going to get that praise, and you're not going to get the glory in the stat sheets like a guy, maybe an edge rusher or a traditional linebacker might, right? Getting all the tackles. But I think that's a really good way to describe him, because he's always involved. And I think when he committed, I remember when he committed, I didn't know a whole lot about him. Looked at what he was able to do at Nebraska. I think he was solid, but not like a wow, they just got Casey Rogers, man.
Yeah.
But throughout the course of the season, you're just like, man, this guy just keeps showing up, and he just keeps getting better every week. And I feel like his impact just grew more and more noticeable as the season wore on. Particularly in that game against Utah, I feel like that was a win that was really due to the play of the defense, right? You had the hobbled Bo Nix, so the defense really had to show up. And I think that Rodgers is a guy who's really not afraid to stick his nose in there, playing in the interior, really help defend the run, but he also has a good motor and can get after the quarterback a little bit. When you got to play some contain and just try to make some plays, not necessarily in space, but when the big guy's got to run, I think that that's something that Rodgers is decent at in that regard too. So I think that was an expected return. But that defensive line is absolutely loaded when you can kind of look past losing DJ Johnson and Jordan Riley, when you consider Rodgers, Amavai, Dorless, Burch now all in the fold for 2023. That's going to be a scary group.
The way that I think about defense and how you defend the run versus the pass is, if you are strong defending the run, as Oregon for the most part was this year, save for really just the one game, you have good interior defensive linemen who can clog up holes, swallow up double teams, and good linebackers who can fill those holes, understand their gap assignments, and make tackles. If you're strong against the pass, you need good edge rushers, and you need good corners, and probably one really good playmaking safety. And if you're running a 4-2-5 like Oregon is, having that extra box safety against the run is probably also something that you need, and certainly something Oregon had, right? Like Bennett Williams was not great defending pass coverage in space or getting down the field because he just kind of lacked speed when he was matched up with wide receivers, which is does beg the question why he was put there on more than one occasion. But I think what I bring all this up to say, that was an area of Oregon's defense that we were pleased with this year. They were consistently at the top of the Pac-12 in rushing yards allowed per game, and they really, they allowed a couple big ones here and there, but that's often when guys like Justin Flo or Jeffrey Bossa were kind of out of position. Like I think of Flo in that run against that they allowed before the end of the half against Arizona, and it was just Flo missed his assignment, and then the secondary wasn't able to track the running back down. But I liked what I saw from the interior here, but where Oregon needs to upgrade are at those edge positions or at the safety positions, which they hopefully have done here, adding Everett Williams, Bennett's brother. But the question I have about Casey Rodgers, and though I like him, I think against the run, made a big play against Utah on a third down. He had that tackle for loss that I think resulted in a missed field goal. I mean, that's at least a 3, maybe a 7-point swing in a game that was decided by 3 points. I like him. I trust him against the run. I think he had moments where he got that pressure from up the middle, but this is why I think Dorless sliding over the defensive tackle position would make a lot of sense, because you do want to try and generate some pressure from your defensive tackles, push the offensive line back into the quarterback and kind of make him uncomfortable. I think that's the biggest area where Casey Rodgers and those defensive tackles can grow this season.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I totally got that question. You're just talking about where the tackles can grow, or are you?
Yeah, well, just kind of looking at where the defensive tackles are, because I thought they were solid, where they were good this year, and I'm glad that Rodgers and Dorless are back, even though the defensive line was such a weakness for the defense. I think that's the area of what they, amongst the things that they did well this year, that's the area where the guys who are operating on the interior, Sam Taimani is in that conversation as well, because he is back. That's where I think they can kind of take the next step forward to help the defense out.
Yeah, I think that this defensive line last year, wasn't a poor group overall. I think a lot of people just get so hung up on quarterback pressure, right? The pass rush. And then that's understandable, because that's a huge part of your defense, and something that frankly wasn't even that great when they had Kayvon Thibodeau, who is shredding the NFL right now.
Yeah, he's so good.
Which is fun to see. But I think, to your point about moving Dorless inside, I think that gives them kind of just a different type of playmaker, a different type of athlete on the inside that they maybe didn't have as much when they had guys like Rodgers, Taimani on the interior, Riley as well. But I think that was because they needed Dorless on the outside a little bit more, because it was Dorless and DJ as the main pass rushers. So maybe having a guy like Burch come in now and Rodgers coming back, you can slide in. You can slide in a guy like Dorless to work in tandem with Rodgers to try to get more of that push on the inside. So I think really just, through the offseason, we're just kind of learning a little bit more about the experiment that is the 2023 defense, right? Because you have some pieces that you're losing, like Noah Sewell as well, Christian Gonzalez, but the staff just worked. I don't know. I think masterfully might be a little bit, too strong of a word, but I think they've worked very diligently to identify those needs and then go address them in the transfer portal or in the, recruiting rankings from the prep level.
Yeah, I mean, defensive line, which we've been talking about for 20 minutes here on the show, continues to be a point of emphasis. They've added, I don't even know exactly how many edge players and defensive linemen and interior guys or, outside linebackers, edge hybrid types. And now they go and add this guy, Burch, who is almost certainly going to be a starter on that defensive line. So, I think that's sufficient talk on the big fellas for one show. But there's one more story, Max, we have to talk about because I saw it the other day and it just made me smile in a big way. And if Oregon fans haven't seen it yet, it'll make you smile too. Kind of like how you will smile when you bite into a Built Bar and realize it's delicious and it is healthy. Just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein, covered in 100% real chocolate with all the great flavors that they've got. Mint brownie's my favorite, but they've got peanut butter brownie. They've got churro. They've got coconut almond, anything and everything you could want. Go get yours today. Head to your nearest Walmart or Sam's Club and grab a box of Built Bars. They are healthy, they are delicious, and you can take them anywhere. I've got them in my pantry. I've got them on the golf course, in my bag, at all times. It's a requirement because they're so high in protein. You can also check them out at built.com. All right, wrapping up today's show with a story that just like the Grinch when he realizes the joys of Christmas in Whoville, just makes your heart grow about 3 sizes that day. But LaMichael James is going to be inaugurated as a member of the College Football Hall of Fame for the class of 2023. I am not saying that numbers are irrelevant, but for this particular metric, they somewhat are because in my view, though he's not the all-time leading rusher in program history, he is the best Oregon running back I have ever seen. He's probably the best Oregon running back most of you have ever seen. And Max, this is just such a really great thing to see because he was part of that era of Oregon football that really brought the Ducks onto the national stage. He was at the center of everything they were doing. Yeah, it was Chip Kelly. Yeah, Masoli and Thomas were good quarterbacks, but you need players, and he was there for 3 glorious seasons of running, and this is just such a well-earned honor and such a great thing for Duck fans to see too, to see him going in at the same time as guys like Reggie Bush.
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome story for Duck fans and for LaMichael James, right? One of the best players, without a doubt, in Oregon football history, Heisman finalist, Doak Walker Award winner as the best running back in the country. He really just did it all for Oregon, and I think really kind of set the college football world on fire with his play. I tend to remember when I think of LaMichael James, I hope it's the right game, but I had a memory, or I had a time when I was a little sick. I was feeling under the weather one day. I think it was in middle school. I want to say it was the 2010 season against Stanford, and I was at my grandparents' house. And like that was kind of when I was like just starting to get into Oregon football. I'm a little embarrassed to say that because there are a lot of people in this space that have been following the Ducks a whole lot longer than I have. Maybe it was because I grew up in the Bay Area, so everyone was talking about Stanford and Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey. But I was watching that game, and I mean, LaMichael James just was on an absolute tear. And I'm looking at the stats right now. He had 31 carries for 257 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So that was kind of one of those plays that really piqued my interest and, kind of made me get into Oregon football and a memory I'm going to hold on to for a while. So he's a special player. And I think someone that always comes to mind when you're talking about the running back position at Oregon, and definitely a well-deserved honor for him.
And when you think of just the best players in the history of Oregon football, it's Mariota 1. It's probably LaMichael James number 2. I mean, there are a lot of different names you could throw in there. Achilles Smith, Joey Harrington. I mean, like the list goes on. But LaMichael's up there, and he's a very special player to me because, when I was a kid growing up and really falling in love with the Ducks and Oregon football, LaMichael was right there at the center of it. And took over after that unfortunate scene in Boise that we all remember, but took advantage of the opportunity and and really, literally ran with it, metaphorically as well. So happy for LaMichael, happy that Duck fans get to enjoy all that stuff, and always happy that we get my man Max Torres. Oh wait, one more LaMichael memory before we wrap today's show. My mom actually sent my brother and I and a couple of our friends this memory from Apple Photos of a trip we took in 2011 down to Stanford for that game that was like 52-30 was the final or something like that. Easily one of the best trips of my entire childhood, of which I'm fortunate to say there were several. Going down there, and we hung in the bay for a few days and did all sorts of fun stuff, and then went to that game, and LaMichael was kind of bottled up early, and then he got loose, and then the floodgates were open, and Chip went for it on 4th and 6, and that screen pass to DeAnthony. Everything was great. One of my favorite Oregon football memories, bar none. And I'll keep making them here on the show with all of you and my man Max Torres, who covers the Ducks for Fan Nation at Sports Illustrated, also hosts the Ducks Dish podcast. You got to check him out on Twitter. He's got the scoops on the recruiting trail and then some. Max, good to finally get you back on the pod. Duck fans, give him some grief for staying away for so long.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Spencer. Always fun to be back. I got to get you on my show now. Been having some technical difficulties, but we're going to work through those and get it all resolved. So pleasure to be on here. Huge time for Oregon. And as you know, recruiting doesn't stop, and I'm here for every moment of it. I love it.
24/7, 365. This show, as you know, 5 days a week. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.